They found a silver pocket watch near the old graveyard in Redemption Flats, Montana, in the spring of 1898. The mechanism was still ticking, though it had been buried under 3 feet of snow and stone for God knows how long. But the story behind it began many years before that midnight, when the bell tolled for a man who couldn't die. Every midnight the bell tolled, but the church had burned down in 1883. Locals said it was the souls of those who never left. The old-timers whispered about a stranger who'd come to town 15 years prior, with eyes like winter ash and a past that followed him like a shadow with teeth. They said he was looking for redemption, but redemption in the West don't come cheap. His name was Elias Cord, and this is the legend the wind still tells. The year was 1883, October. The kind of months where the air tastes like copper and the plains stretched so wide you could lose yourself in 'em, and many did. Redemption Flats wasn't much, a scattered handful of buildings clinging to existence along the Montana frontier, a general store, a saloon with more ghosts than patrons, a telegraph office that rarely sang, and a small white church with a bell that rang every Sunday at dawn. The town had earned its name honestly. Men came here to start over, to bury what they'd done beneath new names and harder work. Elias Cord rode in on a gray mare just as the sun bled out over the Bitterroot Range. Dust rose in his wake like whispered confessions. He wore a long coat the color of old smoke, and his hat was pulled low, not to hide his face, but to keep the world from seeing what lived behind his eyes. He didn't speak to anyone that first night, just tied his horse outside the saloon and walked to the bar with the gait of a man who'd walked too many miles in the wrong direction. The bartender, a rail-thin man named Josiah, poured him whiskey without asking. "Passing through?" Josiah asked. Elias took the glass, drank slow. "Depends." "On what?" "On whether the past can stay buried here." Josiah nodded like he understood. In Redemption Flats, everyone understood. Elias rented a room above the general store, paid a month in advance with silver coins that looked older than the town itself. He kept to himself mostly, worked odd jobs, mended fences, hauled timber, helped the blacksmith when his hands were needed. But every night, just before midnight, he'd walk to the graveyard on the hill overlooking town. The graveyard was small, crooked wooden crosses and a few weathered stones marking lives that ended too soon or too quietly to matter. Elias would stand there beneath the skeletal arms of a dead cottonwood tree and stare at nothing, just the wind and the dark and the stars that didn't care. One night, the preacher's daughter, a girl named Mary Ann, followed him. She was 17, with hair like prairie wheat, and a curiosity that her father said would damn her someday. She watched from behind the church as Elias knelt beside an unmarked patch of earth and pulled something from his coat, a photograph. Faded, cracked along the edges, a woman's face barely visible in the moonlight. Mary Ann didn't mean to speak, but the wind carried her voice before she could stop it. Who was she? Elias didn't turn, didn't flinch, just folded the photograph back into his coat like a wound closing over itself. "Someone I couldn't save," he said quietly. "From what?" He stood slow, bones creaking like old leather. When he finally looked at her, his eyes held something she'd never seen in a man before. Not anger, not sorrow, something older, heavier. "From me." Winter came early that year. Snow fell in thick, silent curtains, and the town hunkered down like an animal waiting for spring. The saloon became the heart of Redemption Flats. Warmth, whiskey, and stories told by firelight. One night a blizzard rolled in hard. Elias was caught on the trail coming back from a lumber run, and Mary Ann's father, Reverend Samuel Holt, found him half frozen near the church. They brought him inside, laid him by the fire, wrapped him in wool blankets that smelled like old hymns. Mary Ann sat across from him, feeding the flames with split wood. Her father had gone to check on the horses. "Why do you go to that grave every night?" she asked. Elias stared into the fire. His voice was low, harsh from cold and something deeper. "You ever love someone so much it burned holes in your soul?" Mary Ann didn't answer. She just waited. Her name was Anna. We were young, foolish. I was riding with a gang back then. Nothing big, just enough to feel dangerous. Bank jobs, stagecoach holdups. We thought we were legends. He coughed, pain flickering across his face. She begged me to stop, said love don't grow in shadows. But I didn't listen. Told her one more job and we'd run. California, maybe Mexico, somewhere the law couldn't reach. The fire crackled. Wind howled outside like a beast with no name. But the law came anyway. Mary Ann leaned forward. "What happened?" Elias closed his eyes. "I found us in a town called Bitter Creek, just south of here. We were hiding in a boarding house. I told Anna to stay quiet, stay hidden. But when the shooting started, she panicked, ran into the street." His voice broke. "I saw her fall, right there in the dust, and I couldn't reach her. By the time the smoke cleared, she was gone." Silence filled the room like water. "I buried her here, in this town, under a name no one knows, because I thought if I stayed close, if I came back every night, maybe she'd forgive me." Mary Ann's eyes glistened. "Love don't burn, Elias. It just don't die easy." He looked at her then, really looked, and something in him cracked. Not broke, but opened. "I know. That's why I can't leave." 2 weeks later, the church burned. No one knew how it started. Some said a lantern tipped. Others whispered arson, revenge from a drifter who'd been run out of town the month before. But when the flames took the steeple, the bell rang out one last time, long and mournful, before it melted into silence. The town rebuilt what they could, but the bell was gone. And yet, every midnight after that, people swore they heard it toll. Elias heard it too. It started soft, a phantom chime carried on the wind, but night after night it grew louder, more insistent, until it felt like the earth itself was calling him. On the 15th anniversary of Anna's death, October 12th, 1898, Elias walked to the graveyard one last time. The wind was wild that night. Thunder rolled across the plains like the hoofbeats of God's own cavalry. Rain hit the dust like gunfire. Mary Ann was there waiting for him beneath the dead cottonwood. "You can't keep doing this," she said, voice tight with emotion. "She's gone, Elias. You have to let her rest." "I can't," he said, "not until I know she forgives me." Mary Ann stepped closer, rain streaming down her face. "She already has. You're the only one who hasn't." The clock struck midnight, and the bell tolled. Elias fell to his knees, hands sinking into the mud over Anna's grave. He pulled the photograph from his coat, the last piece of her he'd kept, and pressed it into the earth. "I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry." The wind died. The bell stopped. And for the first time in 15 years, Elias Cord wept. They found him the next morning, slumped against the cottonwood tree, his coat soaked through with rain and time. In his hand was the silver pocket watch, Anna's watch, the one he'd carried since the day she died. It was still ticking. Reverend Holt and Mary Ann buried him beside Anna's grave. No marker, no name, just two souls finally resting beneath the Montana sky. But the story didn't end there, because some nights, when the wind is right and the moon hangs low, travelers passing through Redemption Flats swear they see a rider on a gray mare, moving slow across the hills. He doesn't speak, doesn't stop, just rides toward the horizon, where the land meets the sky and the past fades into legend. They say the West keeps its secrets, every scar, every promise, every whispered trail. Some rode for vengeance, others for love, but a few just rode to find peace beneath the dying sun. Would you have done the same? Subscribe for more tales from whispering trails under the Wild West limits.